At my wedding, my parents called me a failed artist on the invitations while praising my CEO sister. At the reception, I revealed my artwork was selling for more than my sister's yearly salary. Now they're begging. The wedding invitation lay on my desk. Its elegant ivory paper, a stark contrast to the cruel words it contained. Under my name in delicate gold script, my parents had added failed artist as if it were some kind of formal title. Right below that, my sister Emma's name gleamed with CEO Mitchell Industries proudly displayed. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and at 29, I never thought my own family would try to humiliate me on what should have been the happiest day of my life. But there it was in shimmering letters that seemed to mock everything I'd worked for. Can you believe this? I asked my fiancé, David, my voice trembling as I handed him the sample invitation my mother had accidentally left at our apartment. He read it, his face darkening with each word. "They can't be serious," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "This is beyond cruel, Sarah. We need to confront them." But I knew confrontation wouldn't work, not with my family. My parents had spent years making it clear that my choice to pursue art was a disappointment, especially compared to Emma's practical business path. Every family dinner turned into a showcase of Emma's latest achievements, while my gallery showings and commissioned works were dismissed as cute hobbies. What they didn't know, what I had carefully kept from them, was that my failed art career had quietly flourished over the past 3 years. My modern abstract pieces had caught the attention of serious collectors, and I had built a substantial clientele who appreciated my unique style. I worked from a private studio, sold through exclusive galleries, and maintained my anonymity at my buyer's request. Even my latest piece had sold for more than Emma's monthly salary. Not that my family needed to know that, but now seeing those words on my wedding invitation, something inside me snapped. I had spent years accepting their judgment, their subtle digs, their constant comparisons. Not anymore. Not on my wedding day. No, I said, a plan forming in my mind. Let them think they've won. The reception will be interesting. David knew that look in my eyes. "What are you planning?" I smiled, picking up my phone to make a call. "Remember Thomas Green, the art critic who wrote that glowing review of your work last month?" "The same. He's also one of my biggest collectors. I think it's time he met my family." The next few weeks passed in a blur of wedding preparations. My mother, ever the society maven, insisted on turning my wedding into Dallas' social event of the season. She paraded me around to vendors and venues, all while making subtle comments about how I could have afforded better if I had chosen a real career like Emma. Emma, for her part, seemed to relish her role as the successful sister. She'd stop by our parents' house during planning sessions, usually fresh from some board meeting, dressed impeccably in designer suits that her mother fawned over. "You know, Sarah," she said one afternoon, watching me review flower arrangements, "it's not too late to come work for me. We always need someone creative in marketing, something more stable than your little paintings." I bit my tongue and smiled. "Thanks, Em. I'll keep that in mind." The day before the wedding, during the rehearsal dinner, my father stood to make a toast. He was 3 glasses of wine in his favorite time for brutal honesty. "Tomorrow," he announced, or gathered family and friends. "My younger daughter marries David Chen, a successful surgeon. At least one of my daughters chose a sensible path." He raised his glass, oblivious to the uncomfortable silence that fell over the room. "To David, welcome to the family. Maybe you can help Sarah find a real job." I felt David's hand tighten around mine under the table, but I squeezed back gently. "Just wait," I whispered. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. The ceremony was beautiful despite my mother's constant adjustments to my dress and hair, trying to make me look more professional, less artistic. Emma stood beside me as maid of honor. Her speech filled with backhanded compliments about how I have finally found my way by marrying a doctor. But it was the reception where everything changed. As guests filtered into the grand ballroom of the Four Seasons, they passed by an exhibition I had quietly arranged. 10 of my most successful pieces, each paired with its sale price and the name of its prominent collector. Thomas Green stood nearby, champagne in hand, eagerly discussing the works with amazed guests. I watched from across the room as my parents approached the display, probably drawn by the growing crowd of Dallas's elite gathering around it. I saw the moment they realized what they were looking at. My mother's carefully composed face faltered as she read the placard under the largest piece, "Private collection of Senator James Morrison, acquired for $175,000. Emma, who had been bragging to anyone who would listen about her recent promotion, stopped mid-sentence when she spotted her own CEO among the collectors listed, the same man who had just last week purchased one of my pieces for his company's lobby. But the real moment came when Thomas Green approached them, his critics' enthusiasm impossible to contain. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, I'm so honored to finally meet you. Your daughter's work is revolutionary, the way she captures emotion through abstraction. I've written 3 articles about her technique alone. My father, never one to miss a networking opportunity, tried to recover. Yes, well, Emma here has always had a good eye for—" "Oh, no," Thomas interrupted. "I mean, Sarah, she's becoming one of the most sought-after artists in the Southwest. Surely, you've seen the waiting list for her commission pieces? Some collectors are waiting up to 8 months just for a consultation." I chose that moment to join them, David by my side. The look on my parents' faces was priceless. A mix of shock, confusion, and the dawning realization that they had severely miscalculated. "Mom, Dad," I said calmly, "I believe you know my work even if you didn't know it was mine. That piece hanging in the governor's mansion you commented on last month. The one you said showed remarkable talent." My mother's face went pale. "That was you?" Yes, I smiled. Just like the piece in Emma's office lobby, the one she told everyone reminded her of a real artist's work. Emma's professional composure cracked, but you're always struggling with money. You work from that tiny studio. That tiny studio is actually the entire floor, David said, putting his arm around me. Sarah owns the building. My father, who had built his reputation on being able to spot successful people, looked like he'd been slapped. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You were so convinced I was a failure. You put it on my wedding invitation. I learned long ago that nothing I did would be good enough unless it fit your definition of success. Thomas, who had been watching this exchange with interest, stepped forward. I've been trying to convince Sarah to do a major exhibition at my gallery. Her work has caught the attention of several international collectors. My mother's social instincts kicked in immediately. Oh, we've always supported Sarah's artistic endeavors, she gushed. Such a unique talent. Really? I pulled out my phone and showed her the wedding invitation. Is that why you felt the need to label me a failed artist on my own wedding day? The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, guests pretended not to listen, but I could see them taking in every word. In Dallas's social circles, this will be talked about for months. I think David said, breaking the tension, it's time for our first dance. As he led me to the dance floor, I caught glimpses of my family's faces. Emma looked shell-shocked. Her carefully constructed superiority shattered. My mother was already trying to do damage control with her society friends, probably spinning some story about how they'd always believed in my talent. My father just stood there, staring at my artwork with new eyes. Was it worth it? David whispered as we danced, finally showing them. I looked around the room at my art, at the appreciative guests, at my family's crumbling pretense. You know what? It wasn't about them anymore. It was about finally being ready to step into my own light. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of congratulations and subtle revenge. Art collectors who had paid small fortunes for my work made a point of discussing their purchases in front of my parents. Emma's CEO spent 10 minutes praising my talent while she stood by, forced to smile and nod. But the real victory wasn't in their discomfort or even in proving them wrong. It was in finally being free of their judgment, their expectations, their narrow view of success. I had built something beautiful on my own terms, and no one could take that away from me. As the evening wound down, my father approached me at the bar. He looked older somehow, the weight of his misjudgment heavy on his shoulders. Sarah, he started, then stopped searching for words. It's okay, Dad, I said. You don't have to explain. Just maybe next time. Believe in me first. He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. Behind him, I could see my mother already rewriting history to her friends, probably claiming she'd always known I was destined for greatness. Emma had disappeared early, citing a headache. David found me later as we were getting ready to leave for our honeymoon. Your mother's already called twice, he said, showing me his phone. Something about setting up a proper exhibition, introducing you to her art collector friends. I laughed, really laughed for the first time that day. Let her call. I have a waiting list of serious collectors who appreciated my work before they knew my last name. I don't need their approval anymore. As we drove away from the reception, I caught one last glimpse of my largest piece in the ballroom window. It was titled Breaking Free, an explosion of color and light emerging from rigid dark lines. I had painted it the day after seeing that wedding invitation, pouring all my frustration and determination into every brushstroke. Now it hung there, a testament to every artist who had ever been told they couldn't make it, every dreamer who had been dismissed, every person who had to prove their worth to those who should have believed in them first. The failed artist had succeeded, not despite my family's lack of faith, but because I had learned to have faith in myself. The aftermath of my wedding revelation rippled through Dallas social circles like wildfire. Within weeks, my carefully maintained anonymity had transformed into something else entirely. I was now that Mitchell girl who had outmaneuvered her status-obsessed family at her own wedding. David and I returned from our honeymoon in Tuscany to find my studio flooded with commission requests. Many from my mother's society friends who suddenly remembered they had always admired my unique vision. The irony wasn't awesome on me, but the biggest shift was within my family. Emma, who had built her entire identity around being the successful sister, seemed to struggle with this new reality. She started showing up at my studio unannounced, usually during her lunch breaks. I just don't understand, she said one afternoon, watching me work on a large canvas. How did you keep this secret for so long from all of us? I continued painting, adding bold strokes of crimson to the piece. You never asked, Em. You were also convinced I was failing that you never actually looked at what I was building. She flinched at that, tugging at her perfectly tailored blazer. I always thought I was helping, offering you jobs, trying to get you to be more practical, more like you, I corrected, finally turning to face her. But I never wanted to be you, Emma. I just wanted to be accepted for who I am. The silence between us was heavy with years of competition and misunderstanding. Emma had always been my parents' ideal, ambitious, practical, following their prescribed path to success. I had been the disappointment, the dreamer, the one who needed to be fixed. Your piece in our lobby, she said. Finally, everyone loves it. The CEO mentions it in every major meeting. He says it represents innovation and breaking free from conventional thinking. She laughed softly. I guess that's pretty ironic considering how we all try to force you into our conventional box. I set down my brush, studying her face. For the first time, I saw something beyond her usual confidence, uncertainty, maybe even regret. You know what the hardest part was? I asked, not the criticism or the lack of support. It was watching you all celebrate each other's successes while treating mine like failures. Every family dinner became a showcase of Emma's achievements, while my gallery openings were treated like cute hobbies. Emma's face fell. I never met. I didn't realize how it felt. No, you didn't. None of you did. But you made sure I knew exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Green. Another major collector was interested in commissioning a piece. The price they were offering made Emma's recent bonus look like pocket change. I should get back to work, I said, turning back to my canvas. I have clients waiting. Emma stood awkwardly, smoothing her skirt. Sarah, I'm sorry for everything. For the wedding invitation, for looking down on your work, for not being a better sister. I nodded but didn't turn around. I know. But, Emma, I don't need your approval anymore. I never did. After she left, David called. He'd been watching me navigate these shifting family dynamics with a mixture of pride and concern. How are you holding up? He asked. Your mother called the hospital again, trying to get me to convince you to do that society exhibition she's planning. I laughed, adding another layer of paint to my canvas. Still trying to control the narrative, isn't she? Now that she knows I'm successful, she wants to pretend she orchestrated the whole thing. And your father? I paused, thinking about my last interaction with him. He'd stopped by the studio a few days ago, awkwardly looking around at the space he once dismissed as a waste of money. He's adjusting. I think seeing the respect I get from serious collectors shook his worldview. Yesterday, he actually asked questions about my technique instead of hinting about business opportunities. David chuckled. Well, that's progress, but don't let them pressure you into anything you don't want. You've built this on your own terms. He was right. The success I had achieved came precisely because I had kept my distance from their expectations and judgment. Now that they knew the truth, they were all scrambling to be part of it. Later that evening, as I was cleaning my brushes, my mother arrived unannounced. She was dressed for a charity gala, dripping in diamonds and desperation to maintain her social standing. Darling, she trilled, air kissing my cheeks. I've been talking to the museum board about featuring your work. Everyone's simply dying to support young local talent. You mean everyone's dying to pretend they didn't spend years agreeing with you about my impractical choices? I kept my voice light, but my mother's smile faltered. Sarah, please, I'm trying here. Do you know how embarrassing it was to discover my daughter had become a celebrated artist without my knowledge? That I had been dismissing work my friends had been secretly collecting. And there it was, the real issue. Not that they had hurt me, not that they had failed to support me, but that they had lost face in their social circle. Actually, Mom, I do know how embarrassing it is. I lived with it for years, watching you and Dad apologize for my career choice, listening to you praise Emma while treating me like a disappointment. The only difference is now you're the one feeling embarrassed. She sank into one of my studio chairs looking suddenly tired. We really messed up, didn't we? Yes. I said simply, you did. But surely now we can move forward. I've already mentioned to several influential people that I'd be hosting a proper exhibition of your work. We could make it a real society event. I cut her off. No. She looked genuinely shocked. In her world, people didn't say no to her social connections. I already have a waiting list of serious collectors. My work sells because of its quality, not because of society connections. I won't let you turn my art into another one of your social power plays. But we're your family. We should be involved in your success. I set down my brushes and faced her directly. Were you involved when I was struggling? When I was building my reputation? When I needed support and encouragement? No. You were too busy being embarrassed by my choices. My mother's face crumpled slightly. I thought we were protecting you. The art world is so unstable. You weren't protecting me, Mom. You were protecting your image. There's a difference. She left shortly after her plans for a grand society exhibition crumbling around her. As I locked up the studio that night, I felt lighter somehow. Each time I stood up to their attempts to control my narrative, I became more secure in my own. The next morning, Emma called. Is it true you turned down Mom's exhibition offer? Yes. A pause. Good for you. I think I'm starting to understand why you kept your success private for so long. Coming from Emma, that meant something. She had always been our parents' enforcer, the one who backed up their judgments with her own success. Hearing her acknowledge my choices felt like another small victory. You know, she continued that piece in our lobby. It's changed how I see things. Every morning, I look at it and remember how wrong we all were. How we try to force you into our definition of success while you were creating your own. I smiled, looking at my latest work in progress. That's exactly what art is supposed to do. Make people see things differently. As I hung up, I thought about how much had changed since the wedding. My family's perfect facade had cracked, revealing the insecurities and prejudices that had driven them for so long. But in that cracking, something new was emerging. A chance for real relationships built on truth rather than expectations. My phone buzzed with another text from Thomas Green. A major museum in New York was interested in my work. Success wasn't about proving my family wrong. It was about proving myself right. 6 months after the wedding, my career had reached new heights. The New York Museum exhibition was a resounding success, earning critical acclaim and attracting international attention. But success brought its own challenges, especially with my family's continued attempts to insert themselves into my artistic journey. One morning, as I was setting up for a private showing at my studio, my father appeared unannounced. He looked out of place among my canvases, his business suit a stark contrast to the creative chaos around him. I've been thinking, he said, adjusting his tie nervously about investment opportunities. Your work is generating significant returns. Perhaps it's time to consider expanding, creating a proper business structure. I set down my coffee and faced him directly. Dad, stop. My art isn't a business opportunity for you to manage. But with my experience, I could help you maximize your potential. Create a real enterprise like you helped Emma. I asked quietly by controlling every aspect of her career until she became exactly what you wanted. He flinched. That's different. Emma understands business, and I understand art. I've built this success my way without turning it into another Mitchell family enterprise. My father looked around the studio, taking in the large canvases, the waiting list of commissions posted on my board, the international shipping labels on carefully wrapped paintings. I just want to be part of this, he admitted finally. I spent so many years being wrong about your choices. I want to make it right. I softened slightly. Then be part of it by appreciating the art, Dad, not by trying to turn it into something it's not. He nodded slowly, then pointed to a large abstract piece in the corner. Tell me about that one. It was a start. Later that week, Emma invited me to lunch. She changed since the wedding, becoming less competitive, more reflective. Today, she seemed particularly thoughtful. I'm thinking of leaving the company, she announced as our salads arrived. I nearly choked on my water. What? I've been watching you, she continued, pushing her food around her plate. How passionate you are about your work. How fulfilled. It made me realize something. I've never felt that way about my career, but you're the CEO, the successful one, the practical one. She laughed bitterly. I'm what Mom and Dad molded me into. Every decision, every promotion, every step of my career was carefully orchestrated by them. I never had the courage to do what you did, choose my own path. I studied my sister's face, seeing the weight of expectations she carried all these years. What would you do instead? I love working with children. I've been volunteering at the Children's Hospital, teaching art therapy classes. She trailed off, looking embarrassed. Art therapy. I couldn't hide my surprise. I know, ironic, right? After all those years of dismissing your art as impractical, she took a deep breath. Watching those kids express themselves through art, seeing how it helps them heal, it feels more meaningful than any business deal I've ever closed. Mom and Dad will freak out, I said, but I was smiling. Probably. But you've shown me that it's possible to succeed without following their blueprint. Maybe it's time I learned from my failed artist sister. We both laughed at that. The old moon transformed into something we could share. That evening, as I worked late in my studio, my mother made another appearance. But this time, she didn't burst in with grand plans or social schemes. She stood quietly in the doorway watching me paint. I never really looked at you when you worked before, she said softly. I was too busy worrying about what others would think. I continued painting, adding delicate strokes of blue to the canvas. And now I see what everyone else saw. The talent, the passion, the dedication. She moved closer, studying the painting. I missed so much because I was too focused on maintaining appearances. Yes, you did. Emma told me about her plans, she said, and I tensed waiting for the usual criticism. But instead, my mother surprised me. Maybe she'll find her own kind of success like you did. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. The perfectly coiffed society machine seemed smaller somehow, more human. You know what the hardest part was? I asked, not the criticism or the lack of support. It was feeling like I had to hide my success to avoid your disappointment. Even when I was doing well, I couldn't share it because it didn't fit your definition of achievement. Tears welled in my mother's eyes, smudging her careful makeup. I'm so sorry, Sarah. We were wrong. I was wrong. It wasn't a grand gesture or a social performance. It was simply a mother finally seeing her daughter clearly. David found me later that night still in the studio working on a new piece. This one was different, softer, more intricate, layers of color blending and separating like family ties being broken and reformed. Your mother called, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. She actually asked me what kind of art supplies Emma might need for her therapy work. I leaned back against him, smiling. The world really has turned upside down, hasn't it? No, he said, kissing my temple. It's finally right side up. You showed them all that success doesn't have to follow their rules. The next morning, I received an email from a prestigious gallery in Paris. They wanted to feature my work in their upcoming Modern Artist Showcase. As I read through the details, I realized something. My success wasn't just about proving my family wrong anymore. It was about proving that authenticity, passion, and staying true to your vision could create something more valuable than any prescribed path to success. I looked at my latest piece, the one I've been working on when my mother visited. It was almost complete. A complex interplay of light and shadow, rigid structures dissolving into free-flowing forms. I decided to call it Family Portraits because sometimes the most valuable art comes from transforming our paint into something beautiful. 1 year after my wedding, I stood in the Grand Gallery of the Dallas Museum of Art surrounded by my work and an unexpected gathering of family. This wasn't the society exhibition my mother had originally planned. It was something more meaningful, more authentic. The centerpiece was a new collection titled Evolution of Truth, 7 large pieces that chronicled my journey from hidden success to public recognition. Each canvas told part of our family story, from the rigid lines of expectations to the flowing freedom of self-acceptance. Emma, no longer wearing her corporate armor, stood before the largest piece. She had traded her designer suits for comfortable clothes that actually suited her, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen her. The children's art therapy program she had started was thriving. And for the first time in her life, she was pursuing something that truly made her happy. "This one," she said, pointing to the canvas. "It's about us, isn't it?" I nodded. The painting showed two figures initially bound by identical chains, one breaking free while the other remained constrained. But looking closer, you could see the second figure's chains beginning to crack. "I painted this right after you told me about leaving the company," I explained. "It's about breaking free from expectations, but also about how one person's freedom can inspire another's." My father approached looking thoughtful. He had struggled the most with our family's transformation. Emma's career change had shaken his carefully constructed world, forcing him to reconsider everything he had believed about success. "I keep thinking about that wedding invitation," he said quietly. "How we tried to diminish you with those two words, failed artist. We were so wrong in so many ways." "You were," I agreed, but without bitterness. But look what grew from that moment. Around us, art critics and collectors mingled with family members. Thomas Green was deep in conversation with my mother, who had finally learned to appreciate art without trying to control it. She had even started taking painting classes herself. Though she had made, everyone promised not to tell her society friends. David joined us, sliding his arm around my waist. "Your newest piece just sold," he whispered in my ear. "The one you weren't sure about showing." I looked across the gallery to where my most personal work hung. It was different from my usual style, more intimate, more vulnerable type of family lines. It depicted a tangled web of connections being carefully unknotted and rewoven into something stronger. "Who bought it?" I asked, though I had a suspicion. David smiled. "Emma. She said it belongs in the therapy center to show kids that families can change and heal." Tears pricked at my eyes. A year ago, Emma would have dismissed my art as worthless. Now she saw its power to help others heal. My mother appeared at my elbow, her social butterfly persona replaced by something more genuine. "Sarah, darling, I've been thinking about the old house." I tensed slightly, wondering what new scheme she had in mind. "The east wing with all that natural light, it would make an amazing studio space for your workshops, and there's plenty of room for Emma's therapy sessions too." I stared at her, surprised. "You want us to use the house for our work?" "Why not? It's time the house saw some real purpose, not just society parties and keeping up appearances." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Besides, I'd like to see my daughters more often doing what they love." Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, I found myself alone with the painting that had started it all. The piece that had once hung in Emma's office lobby. It seemed like a lifetime ago that I had hidden my success, afraid of my family's judgment. "You know what I admire most?" My father's voice startled me from my thoughts. He stood beside me studying the painting. "Not just the talent, though that's remarkable. It's the courage to defy us, to choose your own path, to show us all a different way to succeed." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "There were so many times I wanted to give up to conform to what you wanted. Thank God you didn't." He turned to face me. "You saved both my daughters, Sarah. Your strength showed Emma she could choose her own path too. We saved ourselves, Dad, but we're building something better now, aren't we? All of us." He nodded, emotion making his voice rough. "Yes, we are." The next morning, I arrived at my studio early, ready to start work on a new commission. But instead of feeling drained after the gallery event, I felt energized. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Kids are asking when Aunt Sarah is coming to do another art session with them." I smiled, thinking about my next piece. It would be different from my usual work, brighter, more hopeful, because that's what our family had become. David called as I was setting up my easel. "Your mother's on a mission," he warned, amusement in his voice. "She's already planning to convert the East Wing, something about a space for creative healing." I laughed, remembering how she once would have died before letting her pristine house become an art studio and therapy center. "Times really have changed." "You changed them," he said softly, "by being exactly who you are." As I began to paint, I thought about that wedding invitation now framed ironically in my studio. Failed artists have become my badge of honor, a reminder that other people's labels don't define us. Success isn't measured by society's standards or family expectations, but by the courage to follow your own path and the wisdom to help others find theirs. My latest piece was taking shape on the canvas, a phoenix rising not from ashes, but from the broken chains of expectations. Its wings made of fractured family portraits reforming into something new and beautiful. Above it in my signature style were two words transformed: failed artist dissolving into free spirit. Because sometimes the greatest art comes from breaking free and the greatest success comes from helping others do the same.